I go out there to be part of just. It's not when you get out into the outdoors, whether it's the woods, whether it's out on a mountain range, whether it's in the water, you realize it's not just about you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Crew-Smith, and I am a presenter here at Kendal Mountain Festival, and I am delighted to introduce Geneviève Brown.
Hello.
Genny, welcome to Kendal Mountain Festival. You and I were chatting last night at the Montane Below Zero session. Now, tell us a little bit about you.
So, I am originally from the beautiful Caribbean island called Aruba, and hence my moniker, the Antarctic Aruban. Now, those are two very different things. And I'm hoping to become the first Black woman ever to ski solo and unsupported to the South Pole. And that will be from the coast to the pole, taking roughly between 45 to 60 days to cover about 1,200 kilometers of terrain.
So why did you start this journey into outdoor adventure, I suppose?
So I have Lyme disease, which I got in 2013 on a hiking trip in Turkey. And I remember being bitten by something, and I remember being a little, getting a bit of fever. And then for about 3 months I was fine. And then one day when I was washing my hair, and I used to have this massive afro, literally this entire section of my hair just fell out. And thus began a very tough and harrowing journey of 3 years to get a proper diagnosis. And so for me, when I was finally diagnosed, I just thought, you know what, like going from it is a tick-borne bacterial infection, and there are over 71 different initial symptoms that a person can get. So it is very difficult for GPs to be able to diagnose properly. And for me, particularly, I had severe fatigue where I could not get out of bed physically unaided. I was sleeping 18 to 20 hours a day. My mom had to literally come. She bathed me, took me to the loo, wiped my bum, fed me. I mean, when you're in your 30s, that's not what you're expecting. I then developed what's called aphasia, which means that you forget words. And actually, they thought that I had early onset Alzheimer's, which is ridiculous, again, in my early 30s, thinking about the fact that I speak 5 languages fluently and I couldn't actually remember words. I had complete brain fog. All of the kind of general symptoms of night sweats, but literally very severe, where I had to line the bed with towels and had to go from one side of the bed to the next. It was intense, and it basically changed my life. I became depressed because, as you can imagine, as time went on and we were trying to figure out what was going on, no answers. And finally, I ended up going private and taking out my own money and spending initially probably about 800 pounds in total on testing and on finding out what was going on. And it was just, I guess for me, I felt like when I got my diagnosis, I had a choice. I could be either very angry and bitter at the healthcare professionals that had failed me in those 3 years, those that told me that it was psychosomatic. I was told by a junior doctor, but Black people don't get this sick. I mean, I don't I don't know where that came from, but it's just things like that. But it really opened my eyes to the experience of people of color when they are trying to navigate the healthcare system, that sometimes it can be positive, but a lot of times there are negatives. And so I kind of felt like I had a decision to make. I could either be bitter or I could raise awareness and do something about it. And so I started to look for something to do, to go, what can I do? What's the craziest thing that I could do to kind of contrast, sleeping 18, 20 hours a day, not being able to do anything, completely losing all muscle and fat mass. I mean, when I first started training for this, I weighed 50 kilos. I now weigh 75 kilos of nice fat and muscle. I had to do something. And when this idea was presented to me, initially I was a bit skeptical because, of course, I'm from the Caribbean. We don't do cold. And then I thought, no, this would be amazing. Why not? So, yeah.
So any challenging moments that
Yes.
you've faced on your your training for this adventure.
So the training is quite intense. There's a lot of gym training. Now, there's no sled dogs or anything. We pull our own gear. And so there's a lot of tire pulling because that's the best way to kind of simulate pulling a sledge out in the cold. And then we also do mini expeditions and expeditions out in the cold. And I tend to do my expedition out in Norway. And this past winter, every year, basically, I go out and I do a bit of a ski refresher because it's always good to kind of get your ski legs back. And I also tagged on a little mini solo expedition at the back of that in the Telemark region in Norway. And when I set out, the weather was absolutely gorgeous, perfect. And on day 2, a storm started to brew. And one of the things that I do is I always check in with my mentor and just to let people know where I am. Because although Norway has pretty much 5G everywhere, it's good to just let people know. So I set out, and I could see the winds building up and building up and building up. And normally, because the sun sets really early, I try and set up camp at around 4 to 4:30, just so I have some nice daylight, because it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And that day I thought, you know what, I'm going to have to set up this tent at 2 o'clock because this is really building up. And I mean, the winds were literally doubling in speed in half an hour increments. It was ridiculous. So by the time 2 o'clock kind of came along, I mean, I was being literally blown all over the place. There was a whiteout. I couldn't see anything, but I thought, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this. If this were Antarctica, I wouldn't have a backup. So what am I going to do? And I tried to set up the tents. Now, I had pieces of wood to kind of secure the tent in because the snow was just a bit iffy. And the wind was just flicking them like they were toothpicks. And I tried for about an hour and a half to 2 to set up this blessed tent. Nothing was happening. So in the end, I thought, you know what? I'm looking at the wind. At this point, it's 45 meters per second. It's just quite heavy winds. And I thought, you know what? It's not wise to stay out here. I'm just going to pack up and go back. There's no point in trying to be a hero. But the wind had flicked one of my sticks out for a bit, so I had to go and collect them. And I didn't test the snow as I was going along. And so I took one step, and I sunk right into very deep snow, up to about my breast. And the only thing I had in my hand was just my one ski pole. And I remember that thought of just like, I'm just like this. And I thought, if I die, this is how they're going to find me. Like the Statue of Liberty with my hands just like this. And this is not how I intend to die. So I was just like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because I can't, if I move, I feel like I'm sinking. And so I spent a good chunk of time just slowly using the wind and just, pushing away some snow from about my breast region until it got to somewhere where I thought, okay, right now, it's shimmy and fall out, which is what I did. I managed to shimmy and just kind of throw myself out to the side. And I lay there and I thought, oh my God, this is dangerous. This is very dangerous. And this could have gone really wrong. But by now it's pitch black and I still need to make my way down the mountain. So I belly crawled back to my sledge because I just didn't dare get back up into that snow. I put my coat on and I had to kind of just calm my nerves. And the plan was I stop every 45 minutes, I have a hot drink, I check and make sure everything's okay, and then I ski on. I just navigate every 45 minutes, stop, check that everything's okay, and that's fine. If it takes me 10 hours, it takes me 10 hours. But that's what I'm going to do. And so I made it down in that blizzard. Now, a journey that should probably take about 2 hours took about 5.5 hours. But the biggest thing I learned was, in moments like that, there's no point in freaking out. Bring a little humor into it and break it down into manageable chunks.
Keep calm and carry on.
Yes, indeed.
Very good. Okay, so what advice would you give to someone looking to start their own outdoor journey like you?
You don't need to overcomplicate matters. I mean, you don't have to have all the gear. You don't need to, it doesn't need to be this big, expensive thing. You can start wherever you are. So if you live in an inner city and you're thinking, oh, well, maybe I'd like to start climbing, or I'd like to start doing this, find local clubs. Look at what are things in your local area that you can do to build your skills. It doesn't have to be expensive. There's lots of free stuff. And look at local council things. Like, there's lots of stuff to kind of make it accessible for you to get out. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Can you share one word about what the outdoors means to you?
Life. It's just, I go out there to feel alive. I go out there to be part of just, when you get out into the outdoors, whether it's the woods, whether it's out on a mountain range, whether it's in the water, you realize it's not just about you. You're part of this beautiful ecosystem. You're part of humanity. You're part of nature. You're part of something bigger. And it makes you think about life in a different way. It makes you see life differently.
Puts the world into perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
So why is it important to share the adventure?
Well, I think, and this is very personal to me, but I think, you don't realize everybody has a sphere of influence. You don't realize how many people may be looking up to you and thinking, oh, but he can do that or she can do that, so maybe I can do that. And I think that's what's important about sharing the adventure, but also sharing the kind of, not the positive Instagram-y, sexy bits of adventure, but also the kind of like, I fell down, I failed bits of adventure, which are important because I feel like people tend to judge themselves and think, well, if I didn't do that perfectly, if that didn't look super glossy, then, nobody wants to see that. And to go, no, but life isn't super glossy, The adventure is about falling on your face and having fun.
What has inspired you over this weekend?
So at Kendal Mountain Festival, I think I've been inspired by the people that I've met, the connections that I've made, but specifically at people looking to bring the environment more into their adventures that they do, to really begin to think about what impact am I having on the environment, what impact does my adventure have on the environment, and actually to go, you know what, I might not be able to cut all greenhouse gases, I might not be able to make big changes, but there are small things that I can do, and that's really inspired me to think of what are the small things that I can build into my adventure to make this world a better place.
Well, thanks so much, Genny, for coming to speak to us. Geneviève Brown.
Thank you.